What do you think the house of Amalek was doing to Israel? They cut off their circumcisions and threw them heavenly, saying to God, here, take back what you have chosen. It's a statement from the rabbis. Apparently, when Amalek attacked us in the desert, when we left Egypt, we're on our way to Israel, the Jews who they killed, they took the bris milah, the place of the bris milah, and they disgraced it. They threw it to God, saying, here, take back what's yours. Apparently, Amalek hates bris milah. Now keep that in mind, because it's very important in tonight's discussion. Why do you think they hate bris milah? Well, you know what brit milah represents for us? What's brit milah? Brit milah is a covenant, a sign between us and God. And basically it means like this. We say to God, we're going to make a sign on the part of the body which is the most physical, the part of the body which is the source of desire, so to speak, and we're going to say to God, we're going to control our desires in order to serve you. In other words, Brit Milah means you can't do whatever you want to do. Brit Milah means you have to control. You have to use that which God gave you for holiness. God gave wonderful things in this world, but it has to be directed, it has to be channeled. It can't just be wild and abandoned. So Amalek hates bris milah. Why? Because bris milah says you can't be an animal. You got to be a human being. You have to live by God's word. And they don't want to live by God's word. And we stand for living by God's word. You know, that's why I always say this. The word for a tzaddik in Hebrew, a tzaddik, what does a tzaddik mean? A tzaddik means a righteous person. In Hebrew, it's tzaddik. Tzadi dalet kuf. You know, the two-letter root tzad in Hebrew means to trap. The letter kuf in Hebrew means a monkey. We have a letter of the Hebrew alphabet which means a monkey. But it even looks like a monkey, right? A kuf looks like this, right? The hand is over the head. Did you ever learn that in school? Kuf. So what's a tzaddik? A tzaddik is tzad kuf. He controls his monkey. If the monkey is my physical side, my desire, my passions, my animal, a tzaddik says, I'm not going to be an animal. I'm going to live by God's word. How interesting it is that Amalek, the word Amalek, you hear that kuf at the end? The first three letters means amal, the work of. Amal in Hebrew means amelut, the work of the monkey. Basically, Amalek says, we want to be animals. We want to be monkeys. Jews, you get in the way. Because as long as you're going to remind us that there's circumcision, which means there's a God, and you have to control, and you can't be an animal, we can't do whatever we want to do. And that basically, spiritually, is Amalek's fight with us. He hates circumcision. That's why. Because circumcision represents that idea that you can't be an animal. You've got to channel your animal in service of God. So interesting it is. What first thing they did, the Jews that they killed, that's like the picture of bris milah. They took the bris milah of the men, and they disgraced it. They threw it back to God, saying, God, this is yours, we don't want it. Interesting. That's the first time Amalek came. Well, let's see. If Amalek's grandfather Esav tried to stop Yaakov 3 times from coming to the land of Israel, it means that Amalek has to stop the Jewish people 3 times from coming to the land of Israel. So let's fast forward in history for a moment. Where was the second time that Amalek tried to stop us? Well, let's jump forward in history about 1,400 years, and we get to the Purim story. And all of a sudden a man emerges named Haman. And Haman was the direct descendant of Agag, the king of Amalek. Now it's interesting, by the way, we're going to discuss the Purim story as weeks come by. We're getting close to Purim. When did Purim take place? Well, the temple was destroyed. We were in exile for 70 years. At the end of the 70-year exile, God prophesied we're going to be coming back to the land. And all of a sudden, there's Amalek, Haman, with a decree, and Achashverosh accepted the decree to destroy every Jew, man, woman, and child worldwide. There was Amalek trying to stop us from getting into the land of Israel. Well, let's see now. If Esav tried to stop Yaakov 3 times, it means Amalek has to try to stop us 3 times to come to the land. So number 1 was when we came out of Egypt. Number 1, we won. Number 2, at the end of the 70-year exile, Haman tried to stop us. We won. When was the 3rd time that Amalek tried to stop us? But let's fast forward, my friends. Another 1,700 years. And let's go to the 1880s, a movement emerged in Russia called the Zionist movement. A movement after 2,000 years of exile, of disconnection from the land of Israel. Only a very small population lived in the land of Israel for the rest of 2,000 years. Which, by the way, currently 6 million Jews live in the land of Israel, which is very interesting because that's half world Jewry. There are 12 million Jews in the world, half of them are back in Israel, which is a very interesting fulfillment of the prophecy which says the Jews will come back to their land. We're 50% of the way there. You could picture it like if you're uploading something from your computer, you get the 50% right there, Just a matter until we get to 60, 70, 80, 90, 100%. Believe me, you ask your grandparents, your great-grandparents, in Uzbekistan or wherever they were, and say to them, in the year 2011, half of the Jewish population will be in Israel, they would laugh at you. Impossible. We're scattered around the world. There were a few thousand Jews, a few tens of thousands, maybe, at that time. That's all. So let's fast forward. 1880. A movement emerges as a result of the Dreyfus trial in France, in which a man named Theodor Herzl says we need a homeland, a secular Jew from Vienna. A movement breaks out all through Europe, and especially Eastern Europe, with a new desire, a burning desire to come back to the land. To the point where by 1919, after World War I, Britain, which was in control of Palestine at the time, issued a decree called the Balfour Declaration, which says that Palestine is legitimately the Jewish homeland. We're on our way back to the land. And emigration begins. Hundreds of thousands of Jews from Eastern Europe start pouring into the land of Israel. How interesting it is. As we start coming back to the land, a movement emerges in Germany called National Socialism. Nazism. Nazis. National Socialism. With one goal: the destruction of the Jewish people. Now, my friends, the question is, could the Germans, led by these Nazis, Yamach Shemam, could they be Amalek, the nation Amalek, trying now to fulfill the third part of the prophecy, which is that we have to stop the Jews from coming to the land of Israel? Again, if Esav stopped us 3 times, it means Esav's children have to stop us 3 times. Amalek was the grandson of Esav. Once when we came out of Egypt, he tried. 2, when Haman, he tried. 3rd, as we come back to the land of Israel during the early 1900s, 1933, could it be now that Hitler and the Germans are Amalek and they are trying to stop us from coming to the land of Israel? Question: are the Germans Amalek? That's what we have to decide right now. To do that, I want to show you something very fascinating, a piece of Talmud. Now, as I show this to you, you have to keep something in mind. The Talmud was written it's a piece of the Talmud Megillah. You have to understand something, because what I'm going to show you right now is prophetic. This piece I'm going to show you right now in the Talmud, here's the English translation, is from the tractate Megillah. It was written down in the 4th century CE. Okay? That's going back about 1700 years ago. Now, the reason that's significant is because you have to know a little bit of history. This little piece of Talmud is going to talk about a place called Germania. What does Germania sound like to you? Germany. Now, you have to understand something. Germany did not exist. Germany became a nation in 1871 under Bismarck. Before that, there was no place called Germany. Do you understand that? There was no nation called Germany, I should say. So I have to understand that. Everything that's going to be said in the Talmud right now is 1700 years before the fact. Keep that in mind, okay? And let's read together what the Talmud says. I'll read in Hebrew, just to show you that I can. Sorry, it's not so focused. You can follow along in English. It says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Said Rabbi Yitzchak, Why is it written? Al titein Hashem me'ave rasha v'zabamo al tofek yerumo sela. It says in Psalms, King David said, going back 2,000 years ago, King David said, more than 2,500 years ago, King David said the following. He said, Hashem, please don't grant the desires of this evil man. Don't let him expand his wickedness, lest he raise himself above others. Well, what does that mean? Amar Yaakov, Lifnei Kodesh Baruch Hu. King David was actually quoting something that Jacob had said. Said Jacob to Hashem, Rabboni Sha'olam, Master of the world, Master of the universe, Al titein la'esav arasha ta'avas libo. Don't grant the evil man Esav the desires of his heart. Zemamo al tafek. Don't remove the bit from his mouth. What's a bit? A bit is what you put in a horse's mouth. If you don't put the bit in the horse's mouth, the horse will run any way it wants. The bit is what directs it. You pull it this way, you pull it that way. So Jacob would actually say to God, do not remove the bit from Esav. Because if you do so, Yotzim machriven kola olam kulo. Jacob said to God, don't grant the desires of this evil man. This refers to Esav. V'zabamu al tofek. Don't remove the bit. Zu Girmamia shel Edom. This is referring to a place called Girmamia of Edom. Girmamia of Edom. What does Girmamia sound like again? Germany. Very much like Germany, doesn't it? Of Edom. Edom was Rome. Actually, Esav, we say, was the founder of Rome. Because Rome, Edom, Rome is called, Rome means red. And Edom, one of the names for Esav was the red one. He's called Edom. Why? Because he looked very red when he was born, and also he wanted that red soup that Jacob made. So let's read it again. Jacob says to Hashem, Rabboni Sha'olam, Al titein la'esav arash tavis libo. Don't allow Esav to do what he wants. Don't let it happen. Zemamu al tafek. Don't let his descendants, don't remove the bit. It sounds like from his descendants. Why? Or who is this? Zu Girmamia shel Edom. This refers to Girmamia of Rome. She'umale hein yotzim, because if you let them go out, machriven kola olam kulo, they'll destroy the entire world. Interesting. Jacob makes a prayer to God, which King David quotes, that says, God, you got to be very careful. My brother Esav is going to have children. There's going to be a nation that's going to want that if you let them go, they'll go forth and destroy the whole world. The name of this nation is going to be Germamia. Now let me ask you a question. In the 20th century, there were 2 world wars. Who started both world wars? Germany. World War I, 1914. World War II, 1939. Both instigated by Germany. And here's Jacob, 3,500 years ago, or maybe 3,400 years ago, talking about a place that didn't exist called Germamia of Edom, and saying that you let them go forth, they will destroy the world. The place didn't exist. World War I didn't exist. World War II didn't exist. These 2 wars together have destroyed more of the human population than the 2 wars in the history of mankind. All instigated by a nation called Germany. Where did Jacob get that information that there would be such a country called Germamia? But let's look a little further. Rabbi Chama Bar Chanina said, there are 300 crowned princes in Germamia of Edom, and 365 chieftains of Rome. And every day one goes out to meet the other, and one of them is killed. And they all have the trouble of appointing a king again. Now that's very interesting, because Rav Chanina, again, writing in the Talmud, going back about 1,700 years ago, is giving us another description of this place called Germamia that did not exist. You know what he says? It's a place of 300 crowned princes. Now let me just take you up to the bottom of the page over here for a second, and I have a quote from you from the encyclopedia. Sorry, it's so blurry. Here we go. There we go. Sorry, that's much better. Take a look what it says by William Shearer says in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. He's describing Germany. By the end of the Middle Ages, which had seen Britain and France emerge as unified nations, Germany remained a crazy patchwork of some 300 individual states. That's a quote from the encyclopedia by William Shearer. Germany, by the end of the Middle Ages, he says, remained a crazy patchwork of 300 individual states. Exactly what Rav Chanina says in the Talmud 1700 years before, describing a place that didn't exist. He gives the exact amount of princes. Where did he get that information? And he says that there are 300 crowned princes in Germania of Edom, 365 chieftains in Rome. Every day one goes out to meet the other and one of them is killed. You know, it's interesting, by the way. The Middle Ages was a constant battle between two forces. One was Rome and one was Germany. The Roman Empire fighting what's called the Holy Roman Empire, which was Germany. There was the 30-year War, there was the 100-year War. Did you study that in history? That was a battle between Rome and basically what's called Germany, the Holy Roman Empire. That was the constant struggle of the Middle Ages. And the Talmud prophesies that and says there's always going to be a battle between Italy and Germany, basically. How interesting it is, by the way. It concludes by saying, every day, one of the crown princes of Germany goes out and fights with one of the chieftains of Rome. Every day one goes out to meet the other, and one of them is killed. And they all have the trouble of appointing a king again. It sounds like the Talmud is telling us that one thing that prevents Germany from destroying the world is that they're always fighting Rome. They're always fighting Italy. Now it's interesting, by the way, the first thing that Hitler did when he became chancellor is he made a treaty with what country? With Italy. Somehow he knew instinctively that I have to come together with Italy. And that's very interesting, by the way. You know why? Because Hitler was notorious for breaking treaties. He made a treaty with Stalin, right, called the Iron Pact. Basically, he turned it around and he attacked Russia, right, the famous case over there. He broke mostly every treaty he made except for one. He never broke the treaty with Italy. Somehow in his Amaleki soul, he knew that I have to stay together with Rome, with Italy, because together we'll be able to destroy the world. Interesting, because as long as we're fighting, we can't. Somehow he knew that. He never broke it never broke a treaty with Mussolini. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now Rashi says Germania, that means the name of a monarchy from the kingdom of Edom. Rav Yaakov Endin, writing in about 1750 or 1740, writes that it's likely that this refers to Germany or Ashkenaz. Now why does Rav Yaakov Endin, writing in about 1750, say it's likely that Germania refers to our Germany, Ashkenaz? Why did he say it's likely? You know why he said it's likely? Because the Talmud was writing 1700 years before. There was no country called Germany. They called Germania. So he says it's likely, most likely, that name means the Germany that we have today. But let me ask you a question. What do the Germans call themselves? Do you know what they call themselves? What's the name of Germany in German? Deutschland. How do you say Germany in Russian? Nimitz. How do you say Germany in English? Germany. How do you say Germany in French? Alman. So where did we get this name Germania? Well, the Talmud calls it Germania, but do the Germans call themselves Germania? Well, I'll show you something fascinating that I found. Forbes magazine did an article in which they showed what Hitler wanted to create. He wanted to create a dream city after he succeeded in wiping out the Jewish people. And look what he says. This is actually from Forbes magazine. It says in Forbes magazine, how Hitler would have rebuilt Berlin. The dome of the Great Hall is pictured at the exhibition Myth Germania in Berlin. The Germans call themselves Germania. When they speak about themselves as a nation and a resurgent nation and a mythical nation, their code word for themselves is Germania. How interesting. That's been part of their culture for all these years as well. Okay. Now the question I have for you is, how do we know that this is definitely Amalek? Well, first of all, I want to just quote to you something. And I'm sorry to have to present a picture of this individual in the basement, in the synagogue, but I'm going to do it for the purpose of building our own emunah in God. Hitler himself, in an interview with Hermann Rausching, describes why he hates the Jewish people. And listen to what he says. The Jews have inflicted 2 wounds on mankind. Circumcision on its body. What does he have against circumcision? And conscience on its soul. Because it's the same thing, isn't it? Conscience means you can't be an animal. And circumcision means you can't be an animal. They are Jewish inventions. I am freeing humanity from the shackles of the soul, from the degrading suffering caused by the false visions called conscience and ethics. The struggle for world domination will be fought entirely between us, between the Germans and the Jews. All else is facade and illusion. What did Adolf Hitler have against circumcision? Where did that come from? Now, interesting. Thank you. Whoever gave me this over. Now, yes. Yes.
The last part, it's also very interesting that it says the war is between the Germans and the Jews. It's like you're talking about Jacob and...
Jacob is right. That's a prophecy, right. That's right. There's a halachahi, that the struggle in the world is between Yaakov and Esau. That's right. Very good. Interesting insight. 100%. That's right. And he said it straight. This is a war between us and the Jews. And that was his war aim, by the way, as we see. His generals were pleading with him to use the trains to get ammunition supplies to the Russian front. He said, no, those trains are going to be used for transporting a Hungarian Jewry in 1944 to the death camps. He had one war aim: destruction of the Jewish people, that's all. He wanted to destroy us. That's Amalek. He wants to stop us from being a holy nation. Yeah.
Circumcision is very directed towards men.
Yes.
Why is he only targeting?
It's a physical action. It's
like he's excluding women from his.
I mean, he's targeting what Amalek targeted. It's the aspect, because circumcision is the aspect really means control. It's the male aspect. And he's speaking as a man. He wants to be a barbarian. Barbarianism means that you could be an animal. That's what he's saying. I'm free from the shackles called conscience. Right? That's what he's saying. That was his ideology. We get in the way of that. That's what Amalek says. Amel kuf, be an animal. Tzad kuf, control the monkey. Right? That's the difference. But let's prove it a little more, by the way, just so you get in your head 100% who we're talking about over here. You know, did anybody go to Israel recently? You went to the Jaffa Gate? If you go to the Jaffa Gate, you'll notice the Jaffa Gate is a little higher than all the other gates. The reason why is because in 1898, the Kaiser of Germany came to visit the land of Israel. He wanted to ride into Jerusalem on his horse, and apparently the gate was too high. So what they had to do was they had to make the gate a little bit higher. It's interesting, everybody went out at that time to greet the Kaiser. One day I'll get this down. Everybody went out to greet the Kaiser, and I'll just read you what it says in source 3 over there. The reason people wanted to greet the Kaiser of Germany was because you're supposed to make a blessing on a king. And you're supposed to do it. Whenever you see a king, someone who God gave power to, you make a special blessing. So people went out to make this blessing on the Kaiser. Apparently the chief rabbi of Jerusalem at the time, Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld, did not go. It says Rav Tzvi Kupshitz, Rav Chaim's grandson, related that when the German Kaiser Wilhelm visited Germany in 1898, the entire city went out to greet him. Some went out of curiosity, and others in order to recite the blessing, who was given of his glory to flesh and blood. Rav Chaim, however, did not go out. Rav Chaim explained that he gave up the opportunity to recite the rare blessing because he had heard from his Rabbi, Rabbi Shmuel Leib Diskin. It has been said in the name of the Vilna Gaon that the German nation is from the seed of Amalek. They exhibit the classic symptoms of Amalek. Externally polite and friendly, but harboring a deep and bitter hatred of the Jewish people. You know, it's interesting, by the way, you know, we know that every exile, every nation that's exiled us has a certain description. It says Esav and his descendants are always described as a chazir, a pig. You know, the pig is the only non-kosher animal that has a kosher sign on the outside, split hoof, but is unkosher on the inside. That's always a symbol of hypocrisy. Look at me, I'm kosher, but inside you're treif. You know, I'll tell you something. I studied in Germany when I was in college. I was in Vienna for about 8 months. And I'll tell you something about the Germans. They are the most polite people you've ever met in your life. Everything is Dankeschön, Bitteschön, Grüß Gott, Guten Morgen. They call everybody doctor, Herr, you know. The most polite people you have ever met in your life. The most cultured people you've ever met in your life. As they were gassing Jews at Auschwitz, they were playing Mozart and Beethoven and listening to opera. And I heard a story in the name of Rav Hutner Zatzal, that after the war, Rav Hutner was a great Rosh Yeshiva in America, at Chaim Berlin. Someone came to see him and said to him, "Do you remember me?" And Rav Hutner looked at him and said, "No." And he said, "Take another look." And Rav Hutner said, I don't remember you." This man had been through the concentration camps and looked very bad. And so he said to Rav Hutner, "Let me explain to you who I am. You and I studied in Slobodka together, the yeshiva in Europe. And we used to always argue." He said, "I always tried to defend the Germans, saying we can learn from the Germans. And you used to tell me, no, they're corrupt. They might be externally polite, but they're corrupt on the inside. And I argued with you. I said, no, we can learn from them. Don't be so closed-minded. And I gave you an example, and the example I gave you was, this is very interesting, if you know German a little bit. In German, if a German will tell you something, for example, if you ask directions, you know, how do you get to Main Street? So you make a left, another left, go straight. And then they'll always add something at the end of the sentence. 2 words. Nicht wahr. Nicht wahr in German means, isn't it true? Nicht wahr. Isn't it true? As if to say, you know that already. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm not better than you. You know, maybe you forgot it, or I'm just reminding you. Nicht wahr means, isn't it true? And this man said to Rav Hutner, he said, I gave you that example of nicht wahr, saying we can learn from that. You know, when you tell somebody something, add the words nicht wahr, isn't it true? So you don't sound like you're greater than the other person. You sound like, you know, you're on the same level. You're not trying to lord your knowledge over him. You also know this nicht wahr, isn't it true? He said, but I was mistaken, he said. I was in a concentration camp. And a Nazi started beating a Jew. And he turned to me and he gave me the club and he said, I want you to beat him. And I said, I can't. He said, if you don't beat him, I'm going to kill you. So I took the club. And pretending to hit him hard, I did it as lightly as I could. This enraged this Nazi. He grabbed the club from my hand. He started beating this Jew mercilessly. And when he was finished, he said to me, that's how you beat a Jew, nicht wahr? That's how you beat a Jew. Isn't it true? I realized it was false. Externally polite like a pig on the outside, but so corrupt on the inside. That's the prophecy. That's right there. That's what Reb Chaim Sonnenfeld was saying in 1898. Interesting also, by the way, the Vilna Gaon tells us what these people in Germany look like. The source over here, Rabbi Elio of Vilna, it's the Vilna Gaon. He lived in 1720, 1797. He describes in the tractate of Negoyim, You know, there's a spiritual disease that a person gets called tsaras. Tsaras, if you speak lashon hara, if you speak gossip about somebody else. There was a time, doesn't happen today, when a person's skin would turn white. Right? First what happened is the house would have a blemish. What did you say?
It's called piss.
Piss.
They say if you eat milk and meat, my parents say you give piss.
Pigmentation. The pigmentation.
Okay, I don't know. The Torah says if you speak lashon hara and we had a temple and you have kohanim and we had Beis Hamikdash, first your house gets a blotch. If you repent, it goes away. If you don't repent, it starts hitting your clothing. If you repent, you do tshuva, it goes away. If you don't repent, it starts hitting your skin. There's a white circle with the white, and you have to go to the Kohen, he has to identify it. Apparently, the Mishnah says it's a certain type of white, and the Vilna Gaon describes that white, the Mishnah describes that white, and the Mishnah says the white is like the color of the children of Gomer. It's the white like the hair of the children of Gomer. Now, Germoni, this is a man for the children of Gomer. As brought in Gemara Yuma, Gomer, this is Germania. The reason it's called Germania is because one of Esau's children went to settle it. His name was Gomer. So the Mishnah says, if you want to know what that white looks like, go to this place called Germania and look at the hair of the people. Look for that white hair. You'll know what that sign is. You'll know how white it's supposed to be. Let me ask you a question. What did the Germans pride themselves in?
White skin.
Blue eyes and blonde hair. So what do we see? We see a physical description of these people of Germania. We see a place called Germania. We see what it looked like politically, 300 princedoms. We get an insight that they have to constantly be fighting with Italy, or they'll destroy the world. What nations destroyed the world twice? Tried to. Germany. We get some spiritual insight to who they are. Externally polite on the outside, yet so treif on the inside. We see what Hitler himself says that he hates. Circumcision. My friends, if we were to stop right now, you think we have enough information to say this could be a Molech? I think so. And how interesting it is, by the way, that all this was said when? Everything we're saying right now was said 3,500 years ago in terms of Jacob, what Jacob said, or 1,700 years ago in terms of what the Talmud is saying. Okay. But let's go a little bit further, okay? Yeah. What's that? He did. That is true. That is true, but it's clear that the Jewish people were his main target. And he admits it. Just we just look at anything he writes. It's all about a war between Germany and the Jews. He doesn't say it's a war about Germany and the Gypsies. He doesn't like the Gypsies. Doesn't like, he felt bad he had to fight the English. But he had no regret fighting the Jews. Let's just take a look, by the way. Let's see if we could find in the Torah itself. Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's what? It's in style right now? Blue hair, blonde hair? Isn't it genetic? I mean, people are getting blue, contact lenses and things? Interesting. Let's just go to the Torah for a second, everybody. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to see a few more things. I want to take it through. This could be very fascinating. Someday I'll get this done. Okay. I'm going to show you something right now. Just very interesting. First of all, maybe I should do it like this. I just want to show you a few words, a few key words here. Before I do that, I'll show you key words. Kraft. Yes.
Question. Wasn't Hitler Austrian?
Yeah, he was Austrian.
Well, didn't he have black hair?
He had black hair, right. He looked as completely un-Aryan as you could imagine, yeah.
My father actually told me this, how as a young kid he was a painter.
Right.
And how he went to a Jewish artist.
Right.
And how he turned him down, and that's where his hatred started.
Yeah, that's interesting because there are many theories. Other theories say the other way. He had no reason to hate the Jewish people. In fact, yeah, he said that his mother, his grandmother, right, had been working as a maid in a Jewish home and might have become impregnated by the son of the person who owned the place. But it seemed that that house always paid the grandmother and his mother a certain type of living wage. So he really had nothing to hate the Jewish people. In fact, in World War I, when he was a corporal, he was given his medal he was recommended for a medal by a Jewish commanding officer. He really had no reason to hate the Jewish people, except for the fact that he's a Molech and hates the Jewish people. Interesting. But let me just show you a few, if I would ask you a few key words that have to do with the Holocaust. So I'm just going to show you a few things. Just, did everybody sign in, by the way? The sign-in sheets go to Ramsar? Yeah. Just a few key words. Well, I would say a key word would be Germany. Key word might be crematorium.
Wait, where is this from? What's the text?
We're going to see the Torah. Auschwitz, the major concentration camp, would be a key word, I would say. Magefot, plagues, perhaps. Eichmann, we know, was the one who organized was the brilliant mind that basically staged the entire roundup of European Jewry. Hitler's right-hand man. Basically, the Israelis caught him in 1960 and hung him. Right, the famous case, the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem. Right. So those would be key words that we might want to try to find if we were to look in the Torah. So let me just show you something very interesting. One way we examine the Torah for codes is something that we call equidistant letters. What does equidistant letters mean? In other words, the Torah has 304,508 letters. If we can find letters that are at specific intervals, we can see patterns. For example, my name is Mordechai. Supposing we looked in the Torah and I said do a search on Mordechai. And the Torah identified, in a certain place in the Torah, every 3 letters. There was a Mem, there was a Vav, there was a Reish, there was a Dal, there was a Chaf Yud, every 3 letters. Look at that. Every 3 letters, from the Mem to the Vav to the Reish, Dal, Chaf Yud. Oh, that's called equidistant spacing. That's a pattern. And there, all of a sudden, you see the word Mordechai. Well, you might say that might be random, except I might find that through the Reish of Mordechai, equal distance spaced, for example, on top of it, there might be, let's say, an Aleph, a Samech, a Taf, and a Reish, which spells Esther, which is my wife's name. No? If one were to see that equal distantly spaced, even those 2 names together, one might say that's a pattern. Yes? Now, if I were to see through Esther, equally distant spaced, let's say, the Reish of Esther, and I would trace back, for example, every 30 letters, and I find Sarah, one of my daughters, the name, every letter at 10 intervals going back. Again, I would say, wait a minute, this is very interesting, right? That's called equidistant spacing. One thing we've asked the computer to do is to find patterns for us. Let's lay out the Torah as a document of 304,508 letters, and let's give the Torah commands. Find words for us, and let's see what it could find. Now, where the Torah finds these words is very important, okay? Because, the Torah at different points speaks about different things. One place, very interesting place in the Torah, where we might expect to find something about the Holocaust, is in Deuteronomy, where it talks about what's called the Tochacha. The Tochacha is the rebuke. Everyone's understood to be these rebukes as things that will happen in history if the Jewish people does not live up to the challenge of being a Jewish nation. Tragedies that will befall the Jewish people. And throughout history we've understood to see the destruction of the first temple there. We've seen that we could find sources in there for the destruction of the second temple. The question is, can we find something there that refers to the Holocaust? So, take a look over here, by the way. This is talking specifically from chapter 11, verse 16. God said to Moses, when you go and lie with your ancestors, this nation shall rise up and stray after the alien gods of the land to which they are coming. They will thus abandon me and violate the covenant that I have made with them. Talking with the Jewish people. If we give up the covenant, if we don't live like Jews, I will then display anger and abandon them. I will hide my face from them, and they will be their enemies' prey. beset by many evils and troubles, thee will say, it is because my God is no longer with me that these evils have befallen me. On that day I will utterly hide my face because of all the evil that they have done in turning to alien gods. God is saying to the Jewish people, if you abandon the mission of being a holy nation, something could happen to you in the future. And it's going to be characterized by the feeling that God is gone. You know, look at the bottom. It's a testimony of a Holocaust survivor. This was published in Machshavot magazine. The quintessential element that distinguishes this event, the Holocaust, was the search for God. Every Jew who remained in the ghettos and the camps remembers the God syndrome that shrouded everything else. From morning till night we cried out for a sign that God was still with us. We saw him, but we did not find him. We were always accompanied by the crushing and unsettling feeling that God had disappeared from our midst. That's what characterized the Holocaust, by the way. God has abandoned us. Where is God? How could he allow this to happen? Where is he? That's what the feeling of survivors. Now, interesting. In that piece, in Deuteronomy 11, 16, 15, the computer was asked, can you find something related to the Shoah? Shoah in Hebrew is the Holocaust. Look what it found. It found a hay. It found a shin. Sorry? Shin. Found a vav. Found an aleph. And found a hay. Do you see where I circled it? Hashoah. Now you might say, well, that's, nice. I could find a hay, a shin, a vav, a hay, and a hay, and put it together. Guess what? Every one of those letters is exactly 50 letters from the other letter. Equidistant spacing of exactly 50 letters. And where is it? Proximity is everything. Exactly in the passage that talks about something in Jewish history which is going to be characterized by, where is God? God is hiding. How interesting. What? What do you mean?
With Noah, right? Like, they became like these idol worshipping, and that's when...
Right. So if we study modern Jewish history from 1797, which was basically the Enlightenment and the fall of the ghetto in Europe, God allowed the ghetto walls to fall in order that we should have the dignity to feel like a nation again, to reclaim the land of Israel, according to Rev Dessler. Instead of reclaiming the land and feeling dignified as a nation, 1797 to 1933 in Europe was a slide downhill in which we assimilated left and right. The Jew left the ghetto and joined the non-Jew. So many Jews gave up Judaism during this time period. Yet God, in his great mercy, over 150 years, allowed us time to repent. We didn't until we hit 1933. In 1933, what was going on in 1933? Well, I don't know. You know what was going on in 1933? In Germany, there was over 50% intermarriage rate. All of a sudden, Hitler comes to power, and the first Nuremberg Law, which were the racial laws that Hitler and his party promulgated when they came to power in 1935, was a law that said, guess what? Intermarriage is forbidden. By penalty of penal servitude. They weren't at the death camps yet. Penal servitude for intermarriage. No. When we give up the mission of Judaism, God's going to bring us back. And God says sometimes I have to bring you back in a very harsh way, but I'll give you a chance. If we look at a little more, a few of those quotes over there, I'll show you what it says. One day I'll get this down. It's actually the same thing, but I'll just read you a few more of the... The same thing. I will hide my face in these days of all the evil they shall have wrought, and that they turn to other gods. It wasn't idols, but it was... We turn to other ideologies. We turn to communism, we turn to socialism, we turn to all sorts of nationalism. Anything but Hashem. It's very sad, actually. Now, just take a look over here for a moment. We asked the computer to go forward a little bit in Deuteronomy. Did I do it? Nope. Yes. And if we go forward a few more chapters around the same place of the rebuke, listen to what it says. Moshe also foresaw God's response. The Lord saw and spurned because of the provocation of his sons and daughters. He said, I will hide my face in them. I will see that their end shall be. They have roused me to jealousy with a non-God. They have provoked me with their vanities. And I will rouse them to jealousy with a non-people. I will provoke them with a vile nation. For a fire is kindled in my nostril. This is God speaking. And burned unto the depths of that nether world. I will heap evils upon them. I will spend my arrows upon them. The wasting of hunger and devouring of the fiery bolt and bitter destruction and the teeth of beasts will I send. Without shall the sword bereave, and in the chambers terror. This is all in the Tochacha, by the way, in God's rebuke, saying what will happen. Listen to the language God uses. God tells about fires burning in the depths. He talks about hunger, fiery bolts, bitter destruction, teeth of beasts. You know how the dogs the dogs of the Nazis? And then he says, God says, without shall the sword bereave, and in the chambers terror. What does chambers sound like? Gas chambers? Yeah. So we asked the computer to do a little search on this whole section of the Torah. And let me show you what it found. Okay, I'm first going to show you in large, and I'll try to break it down for you, okay? The computer did a little search over here, and it took all of the letters lined up in this whole area that talks about what will be in the future, talking about the rebuke, and said, can we find equally distant spaced key words that have to do with the Shoah, with the Holocaust? So first of all, interestingly, it found in this section, starting with the Hay over here. That was actually the Hay of Hashoah, where I showed it to you before. If you go every 933 letters, 6 times, I guess, 6 times, excuse me. You know what it found? Look what it found. Equally distant space, 933 letters, it found a Gimel, a Resh, a Mem, a Nun, a Yud, a Hey. What does that spell? Germania. How interesting. It found 670 at equidistant spacings of 670 letters. Again, you don't see all the letters across here because we can't demonstrate it. But if you looked at the Torah, you could do the counting if you want yourself, or let your computer do it. At a 670 interval between letters, in this portion, talking about what will be, talking about this whole Tochacha, rebuke, talking about chambers and fires and all these sorts of things. Look what it found over here. It found, starting over here, in Aleph, a Yud, a Chuf, a Mem, a Nun. What does that spell? Eichmin. How fascinating. This is in the Parsha of Deuteronomy between chapters 31 and chapters 34. They probably do, but I don't know what they mean. All I can tell you is they mean is that there are specific, it's a pattern. If there are exactly 933 letters between each letter of the word Germany, and exactly 134 letters, 670 in the name Eichmann. Let's look at Auschwitz. Auschwitz we found an interval of 536 spaces or letters between each one. And let's see, it's right over here. We found Auschwitz. Aleph, Vav, Shin, Beit, Yud, Tzadi. Auschwitz. Fascinating. We found something also interesting. In English we translate it as crematorium for my sons. In Hebrew it's Kivshan Libani. At 134 spaced interval, we found Kivshan Livani over here. Kivshan Livani, which means a crematorium, which means a fiery furnace for my children. I'm not a statistician, my friends. I'm not. So I can't even appreciate the magnitude of what I'm telling you right now. But if I were a statistician and were to lay out the statistics of the odds of equidistant spacing between the exact names, words, and concepts and places of the Holocaust in the parsha that talks about this event that looks very similar to the Holocaust, you know what the odds of such a thing would be? Astronomical. Astronomical odds of just finding Auschwitz, of just finding Eichmann, of just finding Germania, Germany, of just finding Kimshan the Bani, which means an oven for my children. And yet we're finding all of these equidistant spaced. Do you hear what I'm showing you? You can't appreciate what this is. If you're a mathematician, you'll grab this, because the odds of this being random are almost impossible. I won't say impossible, but almost impossible. You with me? Okay. Stay with me for a few minutes more. I want to fast forward into history now, okay? Let's fast forward into history. So again, we said, Maisa Avo Simon Labanim, stay with me. What happened to the fathers will happen to the children. Esau tried to stop Yaakov 3 times to come to the land of Israel. His his grandchild Amalek, therefore has to try to stop us 3 times. So what did we say? Number 1 was when we came out of Egypt, we were trying to get the land of Israel. Number 2, we talked about the Purim story. And number 3, it looks very clearly that the 3rd time was Amalek by the Holocaust. Now, I want to go back to the Purim story for a moment with you. And I want to show you something that has bothered Jewish scholars for approximately 2,400 years, until very, very recently. Please stay with me. You'll see something extraordinary. It looks like this. I have in front of me over here a scroll from the Megillat Esther. The Megillat Esther was written by Mordechai and Esther after the events that took place. This is actually a page from chapter 9, verse 5 to 14, describing the hanging of the 10 sons of Haman. You know what happens in the end of the story? So Esther goes to Achashverosh, and she pleads with Achashverosh, and she says that Haman is trying to kill her and her people. Everything turns around, and Achashverosh gives the Jewish people to go out and destroy their enemies. And we know the tree that was designated for Mordechai, Haman gets hung on, and his 10 children get hung on it. Now look what happened over here. I want to show you something. Esther lists that Esther wrote the Megillah Esther together with Mordechai. These are the names of the 10 sons of Haman. Parshandasa, Dalphon, Aspanasa, Piyasa, Aldasya, Ardasa, Parmishasa, Arise, Aride, Vyasa, Vyazasa. These are names of the 10 sons of Haman. Now the reason Esther writes it like this in a column is to make it visually look like a gallows. So we see it, they're hung. Across from it she writes V'et. V'et in Hebrew doesn't really mean anything. It's like a pointer. So you say Parshin Dota, V'et, Dafa, V'et. Just point to the next one that's coming. But Esther chose to write this in a very interesting way. She wrote a column of the 10 sons of Haman who were hung, and then she writes a column of 10 V'ets. That's exactly how it looks in Megillat Esther. And it's very unusual, because the only place in all of Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Torah, prophets, and writings, where anything is written like this. So it always has bothered us. Why did Esther choose to write it like this? Now something else has bothered us for 2,400 years. Look what it says, where I've underlined it, okay? I'm going to read it to you. It says like this. After they're all dead, V'tomer Esther, look where it's underlined. And Esther says, Imal melech tov, if it pleases the king, Yinatin gam machar liYehudim, allow tomorrow for the Jews, Asher b'Shushan, in Shushan, Lasos kedas hayom, to be done like what was done today, V'et aseres b'nei Haman yitlu al eitz. And please allow that the 10 sons of Haman be hung on a tree. Okay, listen carefully. The 10 sons of Haman are dead. Esther goes to the king. The king says to Esther, Esther, whatever you want is yours. Take my credit card. The whole world is mine. I'll give you whatever you want. Esther turns to the king and says, if it pleases the king, please allow tomorrow, like that which was done today, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hung on a tree. There's only one problem. The 10 sons of Haman are dead. Why is Esther asking that 10 dead men be hung? I'll tell you, this statement of Esther has bothered us, has bothered Jewish scholars 2,400 years when it was written. The Rokeach, writing 900 years ago, writes, I don't know what she's talking about. She's talking about something. Allow for tomorrow, like that was done today. She's asking for something in the future, but I have no idea what she's asking for. Interesting, by the way. What does she say? If it pleases the king. Let me ask you a question. Who is the hidden hero of the Megillat Esther? Whose name is not mentioned once in the whole Megillat Esther? Hashem. His name is silent. Why? Because the whole point of the Megillah is to find God operating behind the scenes. So God hides his name. But we have one piece of information. When the Megillat Esther says Hamelech Achashverosh, it means King Achashverosh. When it says Hamelech the king, who is it talking about? Hashem. Let's reread what Esther says. Im al Hamelech Tov. If it pleases the king, Yinatin gam machar. Allow for tomorrow. If it pleases you, God, allow it for tomorrow to be like that which was done today, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hung on a tree. What is Esther asking for? Well, we did not know until 1946. In 1946, after the war, there was a trial in a place in Germany called Nuremberg. In Nuremberg, it's a picture of it. Nuremberg, Germany, 23, invert. Yeah? In Nuremberg, in 1946, 23 Nazis were tried. These were 23 of the most vicious Nazis. They caught them, they tried them. You can read about it. There's a book about it called Nuremberg. I think there was a movie about it, a couple movies. Read it. It basically became a chance where people gave evidence and testimony saying what these people did. At the end of the trial, the judges, made up of a tribunal of Russians, Americans, and Britain, and French, I believe, 4 countries, they gave prison sentences and they gave death sentences. They gave death sentences to 11 Nazis. 11. The other ones, the other 12, the other 12, long prison sentences. 11 were condemned to death. Now, I have to tell you something. There was a whole controversy surrounding this. First of all, what right did the world have to try them to begin with? Nothing like this was ever done in history. Then there was a question of, how do you kill them? Well, the Germans felt that they should be executed by firing squad, because firing squad is a soldier's death. It's an honorable death. The Russians said you have to hang them as common criminals. The Americans didn't know what to do. There was debate back and forth. And in fact, the verdict was decided in August of that year, and the death penalty was carried out in October. Why? Because there were a number of months where there was debate, should they be shot or hung? Okay. Because hanging is a death of criminals. It's a low death. It's a death of a common criminal. Now, what's interesting, by the way, 11 were given the death penalty. However, the night before the execution, one of them took his own life. His name was Hermann Göring. He was second in command. He had a cyanide capsule which he had smuggled into his possession. No one knows how he did it, because they searched these prisoners daily for anything that could cause a suicide. Their cells, you read the books, you'll see. He had lights on them constantly. Yet somehow he was able to keep a cyanide capsule, some say hid in the toilet, and he took it. He killed himself the night before the trial. The New York Times picked up on that. Göring ends life by poison. 10 others hanged in Nuremberg prison for Nazi war crimes. Doomed men on gallows pray for Germany. This is New York Times, Wednesday, October 16th, 1946. Now, it's interesting, by the way, that Göring committed suicide. I think it's very interesting. You know why? Because Esther asked for how many men to be hung?
10.
Not 11, 10. So one had to oblige. What's also interesting is, how many children did Haman have?
10.
He had 11, didn't he? One was a daughter. And if you know the Medrash, what happened was, as Haman is leading Mordechai on the horse, Haman looks up. Well, actually what happened is the daughter takes the wastes, and she pours it out the window thinking she's pouring it on Mordechai. It hits her father Haman straight on the head. Father Haman looks up. She looks down. She realized she just dumped this waste on her father. The Medrash says she jumped out the window and killed herself, committed suicide. How interesting. I saw a book. Now, don't take this too seriously, but it's out there to be seen. You can do research on it. It's in a book called Deviances of Leaders of the Third Reich. They say Göring was a cross-dresser. And under his uniform, he wore women's clothing. That's what it says. It's a book. I don't know. Take it wherever you want to take it. It's out there. I'm not saying anything. There's no significance to it. I'm just pointing it out. How interesting that is. Now, what's even more interesting is this. Let's go back to the Megillat Esther for a moment. If you'll notice, first of all, as I mentioned, Esther chose to write it in 2 columns. A column of the 10 sons of Haman, and a column of the Etz, Viet, 10. As if to imply there's another gallows for 10 more people. But what's even more interesting is, look what I circled over here. A Tuf, a Shin, and a Zayin. The reason they're circled is because they're small. Let me explain something to you. In the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, there are 4,508 letters. In the Nevi'im, the prophets, and the writings, there are at least that same amount. There are over 700,000 letters in Jewish scripture. Of those 700,000 letters, only 23 are either small or large. So if the prophet is writing them small or large, it's significant. And how significant it is that 3 of them, happen to fall in the same 10 words of each other. A Tuf, a Shin, and a Zayin. For 2,400 years, no one knew why Esther chose to put those letters small. Until 1946. Because you know what we saw in 1946? We realized why she did it. She was a prophetess, yeah. She was a prophet. Yeah, sure. We had many. Devorah, Neviah. Yeah, we right? Take a look at me for a moment. What are those 3 letters that Esther wrote small? She wrote a Tuf, a Shin, and a Zayin. We didn't know why she did it, till she realized she was giving us a date. Tuf in Hebrew is 400. Shin is 300. Zayin is 7. That's 707, just like we're now in the year 5771. She gave us a date, 707. How interesting it is. October 1946 corresponds to the Hebrew year 5707. She's saying, if it pleases the king, in the year 5707, 10 sons of Haman are going to need help to be hung. Please help me hang them. Please help them hang them. How did she know to put those 3 letters small? He gave us a date. But it doesn't stop there, my friends. How many times has 707 occurred in the history of the world? We're right now in the year 5771. So the year 5707, which was 1946, okay? How many times has 707 occurred in the history of the world? Well, let's go with me. The first time the year was created, when the world was created. Well, the first time we had 707 was the year 707. That's one. We had 1,707. We had 2,707. We had 3,707. We had 4,707. We had 5,707. 707 has occurred 6 times. Maybe, how do we know Esther was asking for the 6th time that it occurred, which is 5,707? How do we know that's what she was asking for? You know how we know? Go back to the Gus Esther for a second. Take a look at the last letter of Haman. The last letter of one of the sons of Haman. The Vav is enlarged. It's one of the 23 letters of Tanakh which are extra, super large. See the Vav? What's the numerical value of Vav? 6. Esther is asking for what year? The 6th time 707 occurs, which is 5,707. You hear that? 707, 1,707, 2,707, 3,707, 4,707, 5,707. 5,707 is the 6th time that it occurred. She's giving us the date exactly. And not only that, look when they were executed. On the 21st of Tishrei, which just happened to be Hoshana Rabbah, and the Zohar tells us on the 7th day of the Sukkot holiday, Hoshana Rabbah, the judgment of the nations of the world is finalized. Sentences are issued from the residence of the king. Judgments are aroused and executed on that day. But interestingly enough, my friends, when were the verdicts decided? In August. When does the Jewish New Year change? In Tishrei, which was October that year. Had they been executed in August, it wouldn't have been 5,707. When would it have been? 5706. Esther is telling us it has to happen in 5707. How interestingly it is, from the point where the verdict was given in August, they were fighting back and forth. Execute, shoot, hang, what shall we do? Till finally when it turns 5707, in the new month of Tishrei, right, that's after Rosh Hashanah, that's when the execution is carried out. But do you know how we found this out? How did we realize this? They gave themselves away. Let me read to you an article from Newsweek. This is Newsweek. Newsweek, October 28th, 1946. The 13 steps. Listen carefully. Frantic prison officials determined that no other victim should escape them at once shackled the 10 surviving convicts in their cells. Then in 90 minutes in the early hours of October 16th, they followed each other to the gallows. Former Foreign Minister Yochanan von Ribbentrop, pale and disheveled, unflinchingly inheriting Göring's #1 spot, flanked by American MPs and a chaplain. He walked the 35 yards from the cell block to the brightly lighted gymnasium at 1:11 a.m. Blinded by the glare, he stood inside the door facing the 3 black wooden scaffolds erected on the floor where American GIs had played basketball only 4 days before. The manacles were removed, his hands bound behind him with a black leather thong. Then Ribbentrop walked steadily to the foot of the 13 steps. He gave his name firmly and mounted the 8-foot platform where Major Sergeant John C. Woods, veteran executioner of 347 men and 15 years, awaited him. What was the name of the executioner, by the way? His name was John C. Woods. Interesting, because Esther says, right, if it pleases the Melech, if it pleases the king, please allow the 10 sons of Haman to be hanged on the 8s. What does 8s mean in Hebrew? Tree. What else does 8s mean in Hebrew? Wood. It doesn't mean, don't take that seriously either. That's just a joke. So it says, he stood on the trap beneath the rope, suspended from a heavy wooden beam overhead. while an army belt was pulled tightly around his ankles. God protect Germany, God have mercy on my soul, he cried in a ringing voice and asked me, I say something? The American officer nodded. My last wish is that Germany realize its unity, that an understanding be reached between the East and the West. I wish peace to the world. He stared straight ahead, lips tightly set as the black hood dropped over his head. Then came the noose, and the bed trap banged open at 1:16. While his stiffening body still hung behind the screens that hid the gallows' dark interior, 3 knocks sounded in the gymnasium. That was a knock. Surrounded the gymnasium door, and Field Marshal William Keitel, clothes neatly pressed and shoes shined, entered. After him, the guards, with precise, ruthless efficiency, brought in the others one by one to deliver their speeches and die. Let me go to the bottom of the page. Right? Can you see it with me? Only Julius Streicher went without dignity. He had to be pushed across the floor, wild and screaming, Heil Hitler! Let me show you who this Julius Streicher was. Julius Streicher was the editor of a magazine called the Der Stürmer. He was responsible for intense anti-Semitism. I'll show you some pictures of what Der Stürmer looked like, if you'd like to see it. Der Stürmer was an ugly, ugly depiction of Jews killing children, Jews drinking blood, all things like that. Can't seem to locate the pictures. Oh, here we go. Der Stürmer. These are the type of pictures that he wrote in his depicting Jews as monkeys behind cages, depicting Jews with noses like that, drinking blood of Christians. That was Julius Streicher. Now, this is just a picture of Germans surrendering. Look how neatly the German generals are, even in surrender. So dignified on the outside, so perfectly dressed, right? Picture of German citizens being walked past dead Jewish bodies. Look at how the Germans are dressed, like we said, Amalek. Perfectly, ties and jackets, canes. Everything's so polite on the outside. Walking past murdered Jews. But listen to what Julius Streicher tells us. Only Julius Streicher went without dignity. He had to be pushed across the floor, wild-eyed and screaming, Heil Hitler! Mounting the steps, he cried out, and now I go to God. Right, he has a surprise coming for him. He stared at the witnesses facing the gallows and shouted, Purim Fest, 1946! And Newsweek comments, Purim is a Jewish feast. You know how we realized what Esther was telling us? Julius Streicher gave it away. He knew this was a reenactment of the hanging of the sons of Haman. And that's quoted from Newsweek in 1946.
I have a question,
Please.
Because how everything after the event has happened, we
Yes.
were able to interpret it and find it. Is there something in the Torah codes that describes like future events that are
The Prime Minister of Israel shot that they found out.
Right. Again, we do. We don't know what to do with it before. In other words, it's there. You can do searches. We don't know what to search for. They found when Rabin was shot. They found it says Rabin and it said Yara and it said the name of it said his name over there. The person who shot him, they killed him. Before the fact, we don't know what to do with it. After the fact, we can search for it, and there it is. Yeah.
I have a question. Where did you found from the year of 2012? There was another rabbi who came up with a Torah code, and he said to look it up on YouTube. And it was like,
I don't know. I don't believe we take 2012 seriously at all. It's a Christian date. It really has nothing to do with us.
December 21st.
We have nothing to do with 2012. I'd never even heard of 2012 till my students started talking about it. There is no mention of it in Jewish sources, as far as I know. Yeah.
Actually, we have a lecture here.
Yeah?
The Jewish and his
2000. Okay. Like I stand corrected. I don't know then. I don't know, Bill. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Do you think there's a possibility that people will look into, like, let's say, Torah and see some prophecy and then they make it happen on purpose?
I mean, how do we manipulate the entire nation of Germany to rise against the Jewish people and put us in Auschwitz and concentration camp?
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, you have to believe. Yeah, it takes more units of faith to believe in that than to believe in God who's controlling history, right? So, my friends, you know, what I hope you got out of tonight's presentation is. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is that, you know, I really want you to see and feel, and sometimes I don't feel it fully, to be honest with you. I work to prepare these presentations, and I'm involved sometimes in these ideas, and I have to step back from it sometimes and say, my gosh, look at this. This is real. This is a document given by the creator of the universe. He's there. He exists. He's real. Yeah. Yeah. In Germany, 1933. Right? Yeah, we're at 65%. Yeah. But is it going to be another strike? I don't know. Maybe, you know, if maybe we're supposed to have 3, we've had 3. Now it's something else we're waiting for. Gog and Magog, another war, they say, in which Esau's descendants, which is Rome, the Western world, is going to wage war with Ishmael, which are the Arabs. Which, if you study a little bit of what's happening right now in the political unrest in Africa and the Middle East, it could be very close to European involvement and such a war. So
it's Christian Islamic war, right?
Right. And of course, that's been a struggle throughout the Crusades. That was a struggle which we're witnessing right now in Iraq when America invaded. You know, we're witnessing right now the fulfillment of other prophecies, which is going to be ultimately lead to Mashiach. And I'll tell you something. You know, the final prophecy in the Torah. It's really not part of this night's lecture, but I'll say it in closing. The final prophecy of all the prophets is a fascinating prophecy. It's a prophecy which is happening right now as all of you sit in this room. It's a prophecy that says in Amos, Heishiv lev banim ala avos v'avos ala banim. The last prophecy in all of all the prophets is a prophecy that says the children will bring back the hearts of the parents. We're going to witness a generation where children are going to be more religious than their parents. Throughout Jewish history, it was never like that. There's always the parents trying to make sure the children stay on track. Now we're seeing a generation of children trying to make sure the parents stay on track. This is something that has never happened in Jewish history right now. It's what the prophecy almost prophesied over 2,400 years ago. And we're seeing the fulfillment of it. And we're said, when we see the fulfillment of this prophecy, that's the last prophecy before Mashiach comes. So we're very close, my friends. We're very close. But you know, we're part of an amazing tradition. We're part of a history of the Jewish people. We have a Torah. We have something so real and so holy, and we have a document which we have such evidence that He is the Creator. And if we spend a little time thinking about it and appreciating it, hopefully it will affect us just a little bit to make small changes in our own life and to commit ourselves just one more step deeper, one little bit more devoted, a little bit more feeling in what we do, with the reality that He's really there and He really exists. These prophecies came true. Prophecy of the children bring back the parents came true. And we can be guaranteed that the final prophecy of Mashiach will also come true. Thank you for listening, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.